Is New York City in a bad enough state to welcome back Andrew Cuomo? With just 3 months to go before the primary, Cuomo, the former New York governor, is overshadowing other mayoral contenders, and that's frustrating New Yorkers who want fresh leadership. Incumbent Mayor Eric Adams is trailing far behind Cuomo in the polls. According to one recent polling average, the scandal-laden Cuomo is leading the multi-candidate pack with 33.8% support. The current mayor, Mr. Adams, is a distant second with 10.4%. Among the other contenders, none is drawing more than 9%.
Can Andrew Cuomo really make a comeback? Polls indicate nearly half of voters view him negatively.
Here to tell us what's going on in the Big Apple mayoral contest is Molly Ball. Molly is a senior political correspondent at the Wall Street Journal. And welcome to Rising, Molly.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
So obviously Andrew Cuomo has two fairly significant drags on his popularity, to put it mildly. One, the numerous complaints about sexually inappropriate behaviour, and the second one being his record on COVID, particularly as it pertains to nursing homes in the state of New York. But as we just noted, he's way ahead in the polls. So what do you think is propelling his current poll standing?
Well, it's a very interesting dynamic in this race because, as you say, Cuomo has really overshadowed the rest of the field. And a lot of that is simply because he is so much better known than any of the other candidates, with the exception of the badly damaged incumbent Eric Adams, who, of course, is himself under indictment and involved in this whole controversy with the Trump administration over whether his federal charges will be dropped in his corruption investigation. So multiple sources who I spoke to in the course of my reporting on this race expressed the sentiment, this is why we can't have nice things. That these two and with all of their baggage, have so overshadowed the other candidates who have no such baggage, but who are just not managing to break out of the pack, in part because there are so many of them, and in part because they simply are not as big names. New Yorkers are not as familiar with them, so they are having trouble getting people's attention. Now, these would seem to be qualified candidates. You have a couple of citywide elected officials, a current and a former comptroller of the city. You have several current or former state legislators, members of the state assembly and senate. The speaker of the city council also recently got in the race. So there would seem to be a sort of wealth of qualified options who don't have all that baggage, but none of them have managed to break out of the pack. It is still early. There's a lot of campaigning still to be done. Many of my sources believe that Cuomo's frontrunner status is fragile, but it's hard to know at this point who has the ability to break out of that crowded pack.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like name recognition from holding office previously to get you at least, across the finish line with this kind of stuff. But Molly, can you tell me a little bit about how he is talking out on the trail, what kind of issue positions he's taking, and if Cuomo has been realigning politically? Because he seems to me to be the kind of shrewd politician, like your Gavin Newsom out in California, who would try to sort of seize the moment and change his tune on some major issues. Or is he just same old Andrew Cuomo?
I think it's a really good point that this is not just name recognition, that Cuomo is presenting himself as a problem solver, a pragmatist, someone who, everybody knows he's got this big personality and his critics accuse him of being a bully. But what he's saying is, I know how to get things done, that I see what has to be done. He is describing the city as being in crisis, and he's saying his experience is as a crisis manager. He denies that he did anything wrong in his management of COVID. He says that was a crisis that he managed. That is his experience as a crisis manager. He also denies wrongdoing in the scandal that led to him resigning in disgrace, and he claims that none of those women's claims were true who accused him of sexual harassment. We'll see whether voters believe him. But so much of his pitch is about the idea that he's a doer and a pragmatist. And he's also positioning himself as a more moderate Democrat. And as governor, he frequently played off of the left wing of the Democratic Party, although he also was responsible for some of the liberal initiatives that some critics now blame for example, the city's crime problems, including bail reform. But he's saying that, he is a moderate and a pragmatist, as opposed to some of these more left-wing candidates. And he has particularly promised to stand up for Israel, as opposed to some other candidates who have been more critical.
Molly, you point out in your piece that Cuomo's off to a pretty prodigious start in terms of fundraising. He's raised about $1.5 million in the first couple of weeks of his campaign. And you also note that he does have, institutional support, big name endorsers. Some labor unions have come out for him. But you also draw a comparison that I think is really interesting and which I had forgotten about, which is, your point is that being the early frontrunner is not much guarantee of anything in New York City mayoral elections. And you cite Christine Quinn, who perhaps many non-New Yorkers may have almost forgotten about. But she was the frontrunner back in 2013. She was the Speaker of the New York City Council at the time. And Bill de Blasio came from almost nowhere in the polls to defeat her. So that sort of example, I think, does demonstrate that Cuomo is by no means a shoo-in for this office, right?
That's right. The history suggests that New York Democratic primary voters don't like anointed candidates. They don't like inevitable frontrunners. And there has been a tendency for that seemingly inevitable frontrunner to be eclipsed in the final weeks of the race. De Blasio 12 years ago is one example, but even 4 years ago. And Eric Adams was not the frontrunner until very late in the campaign, if ever. And it was the businessman Andrew Yang who was the seemingly inevitable frontrunner in the early going of the campaign at this point, in fact, 4 years ago. So there's a long history. There's also some quirks to get in the weeds a little bit to this race. For example, there's a very strong donation matching program in New York City, which means that even many of these minor candidates will have money to get their message out, even though their fundraising is not anywhere near what the kind of war chest that Andrew Cuomo is going to have. They will have some money to get their message out because they have qualified for this 8 times matching that the New York City campaign finance system entitles them to.
Well,
so there's a long way to go in this race, even though there's only 3 months until the primary. And most people watching this race don't think that it's going to stay exactly where it is right now.
Molly, just to broaden this out to a kind of national level, Cuomo, as I understand it from this distance, has been to some degree making nice with President Trump, or at least saying that he could have a constructive relationship with him. But obviously they've had a very volatile relationship in various ways. If Cuomo were to win, do you have any sense of what that Cuomo-Trump dynamic would look like?
It's a very interesting question. I mean, one of the things I'm really watching in the mayoral campaign is to what degree President Trump will be an issue. This is a Democratic primary. Democrats are not particularly happy with the Trump administration in this moment. Both Eric Adams and, to some extent, Andrew Cuomo have been less than aggressive against President Trump and his administration. Is that what Democratic voters want to see right now, or is it going to become an issue? The other candidates have been calling out Andrew Cuomo, saying that he is not tough enough on Trump and that what New York City needs is the mayor who's going to stand up to Trump, stand up to the Trump administration. We see the Trump administration withdrawing federal funding from New York City, taking money away from Columbia University, going after congestion pricing. So it'll be really interesting to see whether Democratic primary voters in this race want to see a mayor who's going to be more aggressive against Trump. Now, if Cuomo wins, how would he approach Trump? I think that's a question he's going to get asked a lot on the campaign trail, and he's going to have to answer whether he wants to, put that in more pragmatic terms or whether he wants to be seen as more of a fighter.
Molly, you mentioned lesser-known candidates taking part in the matching of contributions. One of those is State Senator Zelnor Myrie, received a pretty glowing write-up in Matt Iglesias' slow, boring newsletter on Substack, and really about a candidate advancing the housing issue and YIMBYism in New York City. Has housing risen to be important to voters in this primary process, or is it just all about resisting Trump? I have to believe that there's, bread and butter issues on the table, such as building more homes for people to live in and crime, of course.
Yeah. No, almost all of the discussion in this race has been about those bread and butter issues. Very little of it has been about national issues and Donald Trump. The candidates have mostly been talking about their proposals to improve New Yorkers' quality of life. New Yorkers are very pessimistic in this moment. Now, the incumbent, Eric Adams, claims that this perception that the city has simultaneously become less safe, less livable, and more expensive. They claim that that's not true. They point to statistics that they say shows that the Adams administration has made headway on these problems, but New Yorkers, by and large, feel that they can't afford rent, they can't afford housing, and the subway feels dangerous, the streets feel dangerous. It's just not a good time to be a resident of New York City in quality of life terms. And all of the candidates are making promises to address that, and housing has been a big focus. Now, there's a wide range of policy solutions that the candidates are offering. I think you're right that Myrie, who's a state senator from Brooklyn, has advanced the most sort of yes in my backyard type of platform, whereas you have other candidates talking more about things like rent freezes. The left-wing candidates, Zohran Mamdani, promising a citywide rent freeze, and other candidates promising other forms of rent control. So all of the candidates are saying that they would both build more housing and bring rents down. And this is what most of the conversation on the campaign trail has been about.
Molly Ball of the Wall Street Journal, thanks so much for joining us on Rising.
Thank you.
Coming up next, the Global Happiness Index is out. We'll tell you where the US landed next.